Hi, John Mark here with Catalyst Group. Today we're going to be going over the backend settings to Zoho CRM. So to get started, we're going to log into CRM, click on the top right-hand corner here to the setup, and this brings us to the new layout for all of the settings and options for Zoho CRM. So I'm going to give a quick run through of each of these settings. We'll follow up with some more detailed videos on some of the features that get a little bit more involved. So to begin with, we have our general settings. Every user, when they log in, should come in here and set up their default language, country, time zone, and email signature. The time zone becomes important when you're using date stamps to configure how long different actions are taking in the system. So please take care in making sure that every user's time zone is set accurately. Another thing we're going to want to do is make sure that everyone has their email signature in place, so that way it's easy to pull in when we're sending emails from within the CRM. Another thing that you'll notice is each user will have a settings over here to assign their role and their profile. We'll get into this in a sec here, but just make sure that users are filling out as much information as possible, so that way if anyone needs to look up a colleague's information, it's easy to find, using it as almost an internal directory. The company settings, fairly self-explanatory, going through and setting up all of the main contact details for the company, the currency and the time zone. The currency is usually set just once when you set up the CRM. You can enable multiple currencies at a later time, but please make sure that you set up your default currency accurately to ensure streamlined workflow when users are building quotes. You're going to set up your fiscal year. This will help when we're configuring forecasts, business hours, and then if you have multiple currencies enabled, this is where you can choose your home currency for further customization. Last thing under general setup is your game scope. We'll do a detailed video on the gamification within Zoho, but this is where you can create sales contests based on activity in the CRM. It's a great way to get users incentivized for actually using all the features within the CRM and creating little sales contests. Going back to the main setup screen, we'll move on to users and control. When you click on the Users tab, you'll be given a full list of all the users. You'll also be able to quickly jump to the active users. Over time, you'll have quite a few deactivated users. This is where you can quickly go in to make sure that every user is on the correct role and profile. To change the role and profile of a user, you would click on that user's name, click on the settings, and be able to make those changes accordingly. Under security control, we have two options. You have profiles and roles. Profiles are used to govern what permissions a user has within the system, what kind of modules they have access to, if it's read, write, delete, etc. We have roles which then govern the data sharing rules, what people can actually see within the system. So every user will have both a profile and a role. Let's dive into profiles. By default, the system will create an administrator profile and a standard profile. I highly encourage you to only have one CRM administrator to maintain control over the system. The admin can do a lot with the system, so it's easy to make universal changes, export the entire system, copy it over into a new instance. So it's very important that you be very selective with that administrator role. The standard role is fairly well set up, although I generally prefer to lock it down a little bit more and always add back in permissions as opposed to giving too many and have a loss of data integrity. So to edit a profile, you'll simply go in and click into it, and we'll give you a full list of which modules that profile has access to and the permissions that they have for the module as a whole. I'm going to go through and we're going to clone the standard profile, and I'm going to show you what a a general sales rep or operations person should probably have access to, so that you can go through and make those changes yourself. We're going to go ahead and clone this profile. We'll call this sales rep. Now, the first thing that I like to do is strip out all of the modules that they're not going to be using. As you can see here, the interface can get a little overwhelming for someone that doesn't need to use or access all of these modules. We have quite a few enabled here. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is deactivate the ones that aren't pertinent to that particular user group. Most folks end up using Gmail or Outlook as their email client. Of course, you can try out the new sales inbox to handle mail within Zoho, but most users prefer to just stick with their standard mail client. So the first thing that you would do is go through and disable all the modules that you are not using. You can see here that we have a few custom modules as well. So in the case of a sales rep, we would likely just have access to leads, accounts, contacts, and opportunities. Please be aware that in CRMs, the word opportunity, potential, and deal are oftentimes used synonymously. We can choose whether we want the reps to have access to reports or dashboards, and we can choose whether they can just view or manage it. In this case, I'm going to recommend that we just give them the ability to view the reports, but not actually generate new ones, just so that the interface doesn't get cluttered. If we have multiple users all creating reports, it can easily drown out the important reports that you access regularly. The next thing that I recommend is that as a default, we don't allow any reps to delete any records. Just in case you have a rogue rep go through and want to do some damage, we don't want them to be able to delete any records and take them with them. That being said, we'll also disable any export functionality. I do recommend that we allow them to delete activities just in case they make a mistake entering an activity. They likely won't need access to the vendor module. Documents, there are a few different ways to handle documents. If there's some quick reference materials and scripts that you want reps to have access to, documents can be a great place to keep those. But we'll do a separate video on the pros and cons of Dropbox versus Google Drive versus Zoho Docs, and the myriad of options that integrate with Zoho for document management. All have their pros and cons, and we'll address that in detail in another video. For now, we'll just leave that here. Once again, removing delete. Forecast, reps aren't going to have access to forecasts. We can put together some reports for them to see that. And the next thing is cases. The cases module can be really useful if you are handling light support tasks within the CRM and you don't have a Zoho One or Zoho CRM Plus account to use Zoho Desk for your support tickets. Basically, it allows you or your users to submit support tickets in as a case, and then you can assign cases to particular users, escalate cases if they don't get handled within a certain amount of time. It's basically a Zoho Desk Lite. Most people will not use cases nor solutions simply because they'll default to Zoho Desk and the knowledge base within Zoho Desk. Another thing that we'll look at here are products, price books, quotes, sales orders, purchase orders, and invoices. Those generally go together. Now, it's a little bit confusing with Zoho One and the overlap in features between Zoho CRM, Zoho Desk, projects, etc., where we have some redundant modules. For instance, if you're going to be using Zoho Books, you'll have the ability to create sales orders and invoices within Zoho Books itself. And those do not link directly with the sales orders and invoices within CRM. So if you intend on using Zoho Books as your main accounting software, you'll actually go ahead and likely deactivate invoices and sales orders and quotes. You may want to keep products to keep your inventory and product list sync between Zoho CRM and Zoho Books. Keep in mind that with the default integration between CRM and books, we will be able to sync over all accounts and contacts, vendors, and products to keep everything in sync. For most users, however, if you're just intending on using this as a CRM, you'll go ahead and deactivate those modules. In the case of a user or a company's sales process, in almost every case, the way that the workflow would take place is new leads would come in. You would then, under two different scenarios, either convert that lead into an account once it's been qualified, and then kick off an opportunity that represents a piece of business that you're trying to work with that account, and then just have a tag on the account record to differentiate whether it is a prospect or an actual customer. So in either case, the opportunity is the piece of business that you're trying to win with that account. Now, in many cases, you may end up issuing multiple estimates for a given opportunity. So the estimates or the quotes end up being associated to the opportunity, and the opportunity represents the contract as a whole, the piece of business that's finally won, tracking all the sales stages in between. But the quotes and invoices would be associated with that main opportunity. Those companies that end up using Zoho Books or QuickBooks or some other accounting platform to actually issue their estimates, or perhaps they do those estimates in a proposal management solution like PandaDoc, you likely will go ahead and deactivate those modules as well, and simply attach your quotes or your proposals from your other platforms directly to the opportunity record. That helps clear up the interface quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and deactivate these for now. The emails tab, this is going to be something that we'll get into detail when we address all different email options and platforms, and whether it's best to stick with Office 360 through Microsoft, Gmail, go with Zoho Mail. Again, quite a few options, Sales Inbox, and we'll address this in detail in another video. In most cases, however, you'll end up integrating the email platform that you use with the CRM, and those emails will show up directly under the contact records. So you won't need to activate Sales Inbox to view all your emails, for instance, within the CRM. The next thing we're going to get into is the import and export. Again, I would recommend that a general user not have access to import or export any records within the system. To preserve data integrity and make sure that all of the records are tagged appropriately, only admins should be importing records unless you have a very well documented and defined process for sales reps to bring their records into the system. Again, no one should really have the ability to export anything from the system. Email permissions, of course, we want reps to be able to send email. I would be worried about allowing them to send email en masse. I would make sure that that's sent out by a manager if they're going to do any sort of email blast, just to make sure you have a few sets of eyes on that communication that's going out to multiple recipients. Again, we don't really need them to be able to delete any communication. The whole purpose of syncing communication to the CRM is so that everyone is on the same page with what's going on. And of course, we can refine the permissions of what emails are shared and exclude certain domains so that internal communications aren't recorded in the CRM. Mass update, this can be a very useful tool, and in many workflows, reps will need to mass update records, but I would use this or give this permission judiciously, as we can also affect quite a bit of change and activate quite a few workflow rules through mass updating. So again, be careful with how that is used. We do not want to be able to mass delete anything, at least not a rep, a manager perhaps. Changing of owners. This, we can be careful about how this is done. We don't want reps being able to steal each other's leads if you assign them, and but there will be cases where perhaps once a deal is won, you'd like the sales rep to change the owner of that account over to an account manager, for instance. So this is where you can choose who has the ability to change record ownership by module. Mass transfer, again, this is transferring ownership. Sales reps will likely not have to do this. It may be a sales manager if a rep leaves that needs to change the ownership of their records to someone else. So a rep wouldn't have access to that. In almost all cases, you'll want to have the reps have the ability to convert a lead. But in some cases, if you want a quality assurance review before a lead is converted, then you can revoke that access. Many companies like to change the CRM's default workflow so that they define an account as an actual customer. And in that case, what you can do is the sales reps will be primarily working in the leads module and the opportunities module. And we've created some custom workflows to automatically create an opportunity from a lead. Once the sales rep closes the opportunity, the sales manager will then go in, do a final review of everything, and finally convert that lead into an account. And that way it just keeps the system pretty clean in terms of defining all accounts as actual customers whom you've done business with. The print view, this is handy if reps ever need to quickly print off the primary view of their record. The sheet view, this is actually a fairly powerful but finicky, I don't want to say finicky, but easy way for reps to invoke mass change within the system. So I'd be very careful of who you give this to because it will allow them to mass edit and update or delete records in a spreadsheet view. So in most cases, I deactivate that for most reps, just so that data can't easily be updated or deleted in mass. We should allow reps to be able to find and merge records, and we should allow reps to create custom views. When we get into the custom views, we'll make sure to go over that any views that aren't pertinent to the whole team should be only kept for that individual, just so that we don't clutter up everyone's views. Tags, we should be able to allow reps to tag accounts to easily search for them. We'll go over that in detail later. Permissions, most reps are not going to be able to have any kind of user management. Email templates, I recommend that we allow reps to have access to the email and chat settings so that they can configure and connect their email accounts, but we should not allow them to create and manage templates. All templates should be approved by management to ensure that there are no errors. Most reps are not going to be managing automation. This is creating workflow rules that can affect quite a bit of data within the system. Escalation rules, again, that's going to be a management feature. And of course, the lead assignment rules, we don't want reps assigning those. Web forms, this is something that the webmaster or administrators will manage, and as well as the unsubscribe form. The approval, we do, if you choose to use lead approval for new records coming into the CRM, that can be a great way to keep clean data coming in. So I recommend that we keep that. Of course, we don't want users to do any kind of mass migration or really even see the import history. And they don't need to be concerned with storage details. In Zoho, other services, we can see here what other information they have access to. So if you use Zoho projects for project management, we can allow them to see that. Visits from Sales IQ, see visitor data, support tickets through desk. Phone Bridge is for integrating telephone solutions directly into the CRM, and then Zoho Meetings for online screen sharing. Those are all going to be features that reps will need access to. Be careful with the syncing with Google. If you don't want reps to be able to have access to your database, don't give them the ability to sync all contacts with their Google account, because then they can easily export them from there. In all cases, you'll probably want them to be able to sync with their calendar to keep appointments synced across platforms. We want them to have access to the mobile app, but this is a fairly key one. We generally want to restrict the CRM API access. If someone that knows what they're doing gets a hold of an authentication token, they can affect quite a bit of change and have access to everything through that auth token. So definitely go ahead and deactivate that. As far as reps having access to social media, it will just depend on their role and if you want them to act on the company's behalf. And there can be quite a few settings that we'll go into in a separate video for social as well. So that's a quick run through, and as you can see, even from the standard permission profile that we cloned, we ended up deactivating and changing quite a few permissions. So I would recommend that you pay very close attention to the permissions that you're giving to users within the system. It's always easiest to add back in functionality as opposed to take it away later, and this is the best way to preserve data integrity within the system. You don't need to save, it does it automatically. So we'll see here that we now have our sales rep profile configured. Jumping into roles. Roles, again, allow you to govern what data different users can see. It's done on a simple hierarchy. So we can see that we have the CEO, which I generally rename this role as universal, simply implying that anyone with that role can see everything in the system. So if we click into this edit button here, we can see the list of all the users that have that role. We can see that everyone on this role can share data with their peers, and it doesn't report to anyone since it's the highest role. If we go down to the manager level, we can see that, let's go, actually one, we're going to click this plus button to create a sales rep role underneath it. They're going to report to the manager. This is where you can choose to allow reps to see each other's records or not. Depending on your use case, it may be useful for reps to see each other's accounts. In other cases, you may want to keep that private. So if you want to allow them to see each other's records, you'll click that share data with peers. Otherwise, you'll leave it unchecked. And so now what we have is basically a universal user can see everything within the system. We have managers who can see all of the sales reps data as well as each other's data if we select that sharing data with peers. So if you have multiple managers, they can see each other's records. And then you'll have the sales reps who cannot see each other's data. If you have different teams, you can always create a second manager level that reports to the universal role. And that way you can allow managers to see their team's records and see each other's records, but manager one won't be able to see all the records for manager two's reps and vice versa, just to keep the data a little bit more organized and keep managers on point with their reps' records. So that's a quick run through of roles. You can get a little bit more granular with data sharing settings. If you have multiple users in the CRM, under users, you'll have another tab here called groups. and you can create different user groups based off of roles, or just manually drag users into particular groups. And then on the security control, there'll be another tab here for data sharing settings. And we'll go into that fairly in depth in another video to bring some unique data sharing settings in the system. But you'll be able to do things like maybe within roles, you don't want sales reps to see each other's records, but you want them to be able to see each other's calendars. Then we'll create an exception through a data sharing rule to allow reps to share with each other all of their activities so that they know what's going on but can't see the lead data of each other's records. Territory management is another way to segregate records within the system. You can create territory assignment rules to automatically tag certain records with a territory. This is another way that you can govern who gets access to what in the system. We'll do a full review of territory assignment in another video. But this is another way that we can share all of our records with different users along with the roles to make sure that everyone can see the appropriate records within the system. Okay, let's move on to channels. The next thing that a user is going to want to do when they log into the CRM for the first time is click on email and set up their email within the system. Under email settings, you'll be able to check a lot of the default email integrations. You can integrate with any email service. You can choose to integrate via IMAP, POP3, or via API. I prefer that all users use IMAP as it's an easier way to keep everything in sync across all of your email clients. When you set up your email integration, you'll be given the option to choose how to share your emails. The different, let me go through and actually you'll be given this login where you'll log into Gmail. Then you'll be given a few different options to choose how you want emails to be shared. Those options range from not sharing any email at all to choosing domain level sharing, where you can choose which domains to exclude from email sharing with the rest of the organization. Or you can allow users to just pick and choose individual emails that are getting shared with the organization. All of those email sharing settings will be listed down over here. If you don't want to do a direct integration with the system, or if you have multiple email clients, you can use the BCC Dropbox feature, where each user is given a unique email that they can BCC when they send in client emails. That will effectively do the same thing as an email integration, where it will bring that email communication directly under that lead or contact record within the CRM. Email insights basically allow tracking of whether someone has opened, clicked emails that are sent through the CRM. So it's a useful way to keep track of whether your customers are actually getting your emails. The organization emails, if you have a sales or support organization email that you'd want users to be able to send emails from, this is where you'll go ahead and add those different email addresses. They can choose a unique from address. Going down to telephony, there are a number of default integrations with telephony providers through Zoho CRM. There are quite a few ways that you can really do quite a bit with your sales workflow process, and some unique integrations that we can help you configure. For instance, if you have a new lead come in the system and you want the sales rep's phone to immediately ring out to that rep, we can help configure that. So that's done through a workflow rule and a webhook where we can configure those advanced workflows. So depending on your unique telephony needs, there are a number of out-of-the-box solutions, and many of them can be further customized as well. Social, this is where you can add your various social media accounts to interact and converse with your audience through the CRM and pull in those interactions to the CRM records themselves. So this is where you'll go ahead and enter your credentials. The chat is done through Zoho Sales IQ. This is where you can track all of your conversations. So you can place a little chat widget on your website and also track your visitor behavior on your website and bring those stats directly into the CRM record of that user. Sales signals, this is basically allows you to keep on top of what notifications and your workflow with leads and prospects. So you can choose the various notifications that you want to get through sales signals, which is going to be down here on the right and up here. These are the different notifications, just letting you know what's going on and what may be overdue or you've missed. Going back to customization, if we click into our modules and fields, the first thing that you're going to want to do is, earlier we deselected a number of modules that weren't pertinent for the sales rep role. If, for instance, you have a module that no one in the organization is going to use, you can completely disable that module by going in over here and choosing to either bring all modules over to the right, which will be available up at the top of the screen, or deselect certain modules that aren't going to be used and hide them from everyone's view. So it's a good way to keep your interface clean. And this is where you can also reorder your modules. So if we want to change the order of accounts and contacts, we can do that ordering here. If we refresh the page, it changed the order. Up at the top here, we can create unique tab groups. So if you're an admin user and you have access to everything, but you want to streamline your workflow and just pull in your day-to-day tabs, you can create a unique tab group and then select which tabs you want in that group. And over here, if you click on the little hamburger menu item, you can choose which group of tabs you want to view. Web tabs, we can actually pull in via iframe other websites directly within the CRM. So if you want to create or view other websites from a tab within the CRM here, you can create a web tab and have that available for view. Just make sure that if you don't see it pop up, there'll likely be a security message that'll come up in your browser warning you about the iframe that you're not viewing content from Zoho CRM. It's from an external source. Going back to modules, these are all the modules that have been activated in the system. You have the ability to rename modules. Just be aware that if you rename modules and you are writing custom functions or interacting with the system via API, you'll always go off of the module name listed over here, not the display name as shown on the left. So in the case of custom modules, you'll in the API code, you'll reference custom module 2 or custom module 3, not the KEG module, for instance. Diving into customizing our layouts, we'll begin with leads. Zoho has the ability to create entirely separate layouts for different divisions or product lines. So when you enter in a new lead, you can choose a division and it will change which fields and sections are available. So this is where we can create a new layout and customize the look and feel for that particular division. Keep in mind that there are a couple of limitations with layouts. Currently, you cannot choose which layout a lead gets routed to if it's coming in from a web form. You'd have to do that through layout rules, which we end up using for our clients far more often than just layouts in general. So layout rules, as opposed to selecting the master layout for the entire record, a layout rule will be field-based. So you can say that if there's a particular interest in one product or another, we can then choose to show or hide sections based on that particular product that's selected. And that way it's easily dynamically changed. If they have multiple interests, you can select multiple options and display multiple sections. So be careful with using layout rules. A lot of the time it does create a fair amount of duplicate work because you have to think about the different mappings and workflow rules and whether they're applicable to multiple layouts or not. Going back to the other options here, on the leads module, we can choose our duplicate check to when a lead is converted to check for duplicates in the contact module or not. We can also choose to show which profiles have access to that module. And if we click into that module, we can further refine permissions by going down to the field level and setting which profiles have access to read, write, read only, or not see that field at all. So there are a few different ways to cover data sharing and view permissions within the system. The final thing that I wanted to, or a couple things that I wanted to point out for leads, is the lead conversion mapping. When you convert a lead, all of the information from the lead record is either transferred to the account, contact, opportunity, or all three. So this is where you can choose how those fields are mapped over when the lead is converted. Quick trick of the trade, make sure that if you're adding in any new fields that you add it into the lead module. This will save you a lot of time and effort. If we create a new field over here, and let's just name this as an example. Before you save this page, make sure that you go into Edit Properties, and then you can also create the field for account, contact, and opportunity. This is going to save you a tremendous amount of time because the lead mapping will be done for you automatically, and that field would be created in these three modules as well. So it'll literally take you probably about a fifth of the time to enter new fields and map them if you do it this way, as opposed to individually adding them to each module and then manually doing the mapping yourself. The next thing I wanted to show is the map dependency fields. So if you have multiple drop-downs, for instance, countries and states, you don't want to show all the states for every country in the world. You want to be able to refine that list, so if they select the United States, it only shows the 50 United States or its territories. So when you create a dependency field, you can choose a parent, which will be the country, and then the child, which will be the state, so that you can choose which one is which options are available for a particular parent. So let's just do this. Maybe you have different lead statuses depending on the source. We can create the parent as lead source, the child as lead status. Now we can say that if the lead source is advertisement, which options under lead status should be available. And if you need to select multiple, you'll simply select the control key and select multiple. And this way, you don't have all lead statuses available for every lead source. You can refine which options are available. When we click into the module itself, this is where we can choose to have various layout rules. So this is what you'll end up using more often than not, is a layout rule. And you choose the primary field that it's based off of. So let's go off of that. I'm just finding a good example here. Yeah, maybe for different lead statuses, you want to show different sections. So you can say that if the lead status is pre-qualified, then at this time, we want to choose a particular condition if you want to further refine. If it's the lead status is pre-qualified and they're in the US, then maybe you have a section of fields that you want to show just for pre-qualified leads in the US. So you can build your criteria, and then the action could be to show a full section. So you can choose a full section of fields to display, or you can choose to just show a particular field or set that certain fields are mandatory. So if you have a lead pre-qualified in the US, maybe you require that the zip code be present. So this really helps keep a lot of data integrity, and also keeps the user interface fairly simple by not showing in fields that are not relevant to a particular state. Keep in mind that these layout rules can get a little bit tricky. As you saw here, you only have the ability at this time to show certain fields and sections, not hide others. So you need to make sure that you are being fully inclusive of everything that you need to either show or hide. And you can, depending on how much data you're tracking, it can get fairly complicated to keep track of, to make sure that all of the relevant information is displayed. Next thing I want to go into are the fields. So you'll be able to keep track of how many fields you have left. Over here on the left-hand side, we can see how many fields of different field types we have available. If you want to create new fields, you can simply click and drag a field from the left-hand side here into its appropriate section. If you want to remove a field, you can click the trash can. That's not going to delete the field, it's just going to remove it from view. And it's not until you delete that field from here under unused fields that the field is actually truly deleted. Another thing I wanted to point out is links and buttons. You can create custom links and buttons to show up on a particular module. So we can see here that we can name this button. We can choose to place it on either the list view, the view page, or the edit page of a particular record. And we can choose what we want to happen. So we can choose to invoke a URL, a custom function, to perform custom actions within the system. This just gives you an overview of what's going on in that module, so you can see how everything is linked and within the system. Because as you build this out, you'll notice that you'll probably have dozens of workflow rules per module, and it can be a little bit tricky to see what's happening within the system. So it's a nice way to quickly get a snapshot. Finally, on the leads module, let me make sure I've gone over all of these settings. We can choose to require a field or not. So this checkbox here will mark it as required, and you can also set a default value so that you can speed the building out of records for different field types. This tooltip, if you hover over a field with a little info icon, you can choose to display a message to give the user more information about that particular field. That covers a lot of the options for our module customization and field usage. So let's move on to templates. Templates of where you can create email templates for users to access, inventory templates. So this is things like quote and invoice templates. And then mail merge templates are things like letters that you need to perhaps print and send to clients, full proposals. It basically allows you to merge different field values into a Word document and then either keep it as Word or export it as a PDF. Keep in mind that for these templates, you're going to want to make sure that you are putting them in the correct folders so that users have access to them. You'll also see the statistics from that particular template to see how engaging it is and how many people are actually interacting with it. The templates themselves are pretty intuitive to build and configure. What you can do is when you're typing out a particular letter, you can just type in the hash symbol, and it's going to pull up all of the tokens for fields that are available for that particular module. So let's actually go in and create a quick new one here. It'll ask us the module that we want to create the email template for. And then we can choose from a number of pre-designed templates, or creating our own. Or if you want to insert your own HTML, you can click this button in the top right over here. So let's just go with this basic layout. And at this point, you can click and drag elements from the left-hand side here into your email template. Once again, pushing the hash tag to pull in any tokens from records. And much like any text editor, you have a number of options here to further configure and refine the content. And then if you'd like an attachment to go out with the email, you can attach a record here as well. You, again, are going to want to make sure that you are keeping track of where you are saving different templates so that they're available to all users. And you can do that over here. The next thing we'll go over, copy customization. You're not going to be using this too much unless you have a franchise and need to have separate CRMs for each franchise. You can build out one instance of the CRM and then copy it into another. Customizing the home page, you can choose what dashboards you'd like to display on the home page. A couple of different ways to manage this. You can either go here to the home page itself, create predefined home page views, or customize the home page. Under automation, we'll go into workflow rules. So workflow rules allow you to create automations within the system. By default, you'll see all the workflow rules here. You can sort these workflow rules by module and or certain actions. Let's go through and create a workflow rule. So maybe what we want to do is a new lead workflow. It's going to be based on the leads module. Now, when we go to create a workflow rule, there are a few things that we can do here. We can choose to activate this workflow rule based on a record action or based on a date time field. Most of the time, you're going to be activating this on a record action. Now, you can choose to activate this workflow on when a record is created, when it's edited, create or edit, field update, or delete. A couple of things to be cognizant of when you are configuring workflow rules is this trigger. So if you have custom functions involved that are also activated on create, keep in mind that the fields that may be updated by that custom function may not be populated before this workflow rule runs. So in many cases, you will have instances where you'll want multiple actions to be taking place on a record being created or multiple workflow rules being activated. But a big safety feature that also hindrance is that the CRM will not allow you to have a workflow rule execute another workflow rule. So if, for instance, you have a workflow rule that populates a particular field value, and based on that field value, you want another workflow rule to run and execute another series of actions, it will not trigger because that field was updated by a previous workflow rule. It's a safeguard so that you don't have feedback loops where you have workflow rules executing other workflow rules and drawing on system resources. So a good way to configure that is going to be based off of time-based actions or writing custom functions that can perform multiple actions within a particular series. So once again, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any specific questions of which triggers to use. But these ones will basically create is fairly self-explanatory when a record is created. Edit, anytime the record is actually edited, when you click that edit button, it will activate the workflow. Field update is if a particular field is updated, not the entire, not any field on the record, and then delete is fairly self-explanatory. So let's go through this. If we want a workflow rule to be triggered on create, we can choose to have it apply to all records, all certain conditions. So maybe we want it to be, if a lead source is not empty, then we can choose a number of instant actions to take place. I believe the current limit is about 5 instant and 5 scheduled actions that can be taking place off of a workflow rule. So you can do things like sending emails, creating tasks for specific users, updating certain fields, invoking a webhook, tagging a particular record, or invoking a custom function. The scheduled actions can be scheduled, the soonest they can be scheduled is 15 minutes. So this relates back to this problem with workflow rules not executing other workflow rules. If you want actions to take place instantaneously, so for instance, if you do some sophisticated round robining and you write a custom function to round robin leads to a particular user, and then you want an email to go out to that new lead owner all instantaneously so that you can respond to that lead immediately, you'll have to do that within a custom function, unless you wrote a custom function to first assign the lead here, and then 15 minutes later sent that introductory email to that new rep, telling them that they have a lead. You can choose to activate or deactivate workflow rules as needed. I'd be fairly judicious in making sure that you give good descriptions to your workflow rules. Over time, it's not uncommon to have 40+ workflow rules per module, and it'll be an easy way to know what's going on with each workflow rule to make sure that you don't have any overlap in those workflow rules. The next thing on automation is the blueprint. The blueprint is a really neat new feature that allows you to require that certain actions take place within the system in a prescribed order. So for instance, let's dive in and quickly create one for our leads module. Again, this is where you'll have to choose which layout it's tagged to. So if you want a blueprint to be tagged to all layouts, you have to clone it and make sure that it's tagged to all of them. Then we choose a field that we want to be the driver for this particular blueprint. So maybe there are certain fields that need to be filled out based on the lead status. We can go ahead and create a blueprint based on the lead status. And we will apply this to all leads, or you can choose to refine it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to basically create our map of how a particular record can progress through the different lead statuses. So if we start over here, and we have a new record come in, it gets tagged as not contacted. As an example, if we want to move it through to pre-qualified, we can click and drag from this particular state to that one, and you can see that it adds in this transition. When you click into this transition, we can choose to require certain fields be filled out before it can be marked as pre-qualified. So required So now you can choose to create conditions where the user will not be able to edit the lead status into a pre-qualified state unless certain actions have taken place before that. So we can basically say that before a user updates a status from not contacted to pre-qualified, we want certain things to be filled out. And we can say that the state cannot be empty. So now, if the user tries to update the status to pre-qualified, it will give them an error message saying that they haven't filled this out before they can tag it as such. This is a great way for sales managers to make sure that their reps are keeping everything updated appropriately. And if they have a particular status that triggers a managerial review, we can require that the rep goes through and checks that all of the information on the record is filled out before the manager gets involved to keep everything complete. So you can create these transitions as either before or during a conversion, or a series of actions to take place after it's in that pre-qualified state. So again, as an example, if we require that before a lead is marked as pre-qualified, the state is filled in, we can say that they have to put in notes explaining that qualification during the transition. And then once it's marked as pre-qualified, we can then send an email alert to the manager or to the senior sales rep or closer that you have a pre-qualified lead. So the blueprints is a great way that you can really prescribe a particular workflow for your users and make sure that everything in the system is filled out appropriately. What you're going to want to make sure, though, is when you are designing your blueprint, you may not always have a user go from a not contacted state to pre-qualified. You may have it also go through as a junk lead. So you'll have different options here that you'll need to fill out. So if you don't want any conditions to tag it as a junk lead, you'll just leave that blank. And you'll need to make sure that you have all of these options in here. Otherwise, they will not be able to update that lead from a not contacted state to lost lead unless you create that as a viable option or as a transitionary state. So do make sure that you are using all of the available states here. and that you create the appropriate transitions, and it will work beautifully. If you do not, then users will get frustrated that they cannot transition a lead from not contacted to lost, for instance. Or if they get pre-qualified and then it gets lost, we're going to want to make sure that we have that as an available route that the lead can take as well. Otherwise, they'll just get stuck in this pre-qualified state with no way to go. So, and you may have a universal tag like this. Again, you're going to want to be able to link from every state to the possible future state that that lead can go to. So these can get a little bit involved depending on how complex your sales process is, but it can also really help keep your data organized. Schedules, this is a new feature of Zoho's that allows you to schedule custom functions to run periodically. You're allowed 10 per day. So if you have a custom function that needs to check for certain conditions on a daily basis, this is a great feature to have custom functions run on a particular schedule. It's fairly self-explanatory to create one. I don't have any custom functions pre-configured, but you basically select the custom function and then choose how often you'd like it to run, whether it's daily, monthly, etc., and the time, and then it will execute that custom function. Under actions, these are all of the actions that can be associated to workflow rules. So alerts are emails that get sent out. Tasks are created within the system and assigned to users with due dates. You can update fields, invoke webhooks to let third-party applications either push or pull information. And then custom functions, obviously you can do a number of things with custom functions, as well as check any failures for custom functions. Case escalation rules, if you're using the cases module to track support tickets within the CRM, this is how you can escalate cases to a manager if they're not resolved on time. And then lead scoring rules. This is a new feature of Zoho that allows you to basically give points to leads, contacts, accounts, and opportunities based on certain activity. We generally advise clients to use the system for a little while to identify patterns of what really constitutes a strong lead. Otherwise, your variables can get a little misleading in terms of how well qualified a particular record may be. Going through to data administration, there's data work can be one of those things that can be very easy or can get fairly complex. When importing data, the best thing that we can advise if you're going to do it yourselves is make sure that you're doing it in the exact order that Zoho requires, especially if you're doing a migration from another CRM. Make sure that you're importing all the data from your previous CRM in the exact order that it specifies in the list. So you'd first import users, then campaigns, then leads, and so on and so forth, to make sure that all the records get associated properly with the primary IDs from your previous CRM. The new date and time formatting feature will help automatically identify date and time formats to get records tagged appropriately. And then in the import history, of course, you'll be able to see all of your imports and undo one if it didn't come through correctly. On the export side, there are a couple of different ways that you can export records from the system. You can do that through a report if you don't need all the fields, or you can go in here to export and select a particular module. This limits you to 3,000 records. If you need to do a full data backup, you'll go here to data backup, and you'll I highly recommend that you set up the 2 free backups that are allowed per month, and you can always order a full backup on demand as well for an extra $10. On the storage side, this is where you can keep track of your storage. Keep in mind that CRM storage is relatively expensive when compared to Zoho Doc storage or Google Drive. So if you have a lot of images, for instance, or videos that you want to keep on file, you'll likely keep those in Zoho Docs or Google Drive. But any kind of sales contracts or proposals, those will be tagged directly in the CRM. You can purchase additional storage within the CRM. Most users will not reach their limit if they're just keeping documents within the CRM. It's only if you get to using videos and images that you'll need to likely keep those files in Zoho Docs or Drive. If you accidentally delete anything, you can go into the recycle bin and restore it. And the audit log is a very useful feature for management to see what's going on in the system. So if you have hourly employees that are required to work in the system, you can actually go in and see everything that they've done in the system that day. So you can choose to see what's going on in a particular module, certain actions that are being taken, or if you have multiple users, you'll have a user filter here. So you can see what that particular user has done on that particular day, when they logged in, when they logged out, etc. Of course, you can export this as well if you want to run your own reports on it. The Zoho Marketplace is becoming increasingly robust. So there are a number of extensions and custom functions that are available through the marketplace. And this can help you integrate and further extend functionality of the CRM. So definitely check that out, as there may be some good out-of-the-box functionality that you can take advantage of. You can go down here to the Zoho Marketplace. This is basically just connecting a lot of the default Zoho apps together. The default integrations will suffice for most users. However, there are some limitations with how different Zoho products integrate with one another. So please feel free to reach out to us if you need a custom integration to sync more information than the default allows. On the Google side, you can connect your contacts, calendar, or AdWords account to track your AdWords leads. On the Microsoft side, connecting Outlook and Word. Under developer space, we can see how many APIs have been used. There's limited data here. Keep in mind that there are a few different API types that can be used within Zoho's ecosystem, and not all of them are reflected here. So you'll have Zoho CRM APIs, Zoho Creator APIs, and we generally need to go directly to Zoho to get a very granular look at what's going on with API usage. The Zoho Service Communication Key will pull up your key for connecting different Zoho apps together. And then if you need to generate a new authentication token, you can go here to generate auth token, name the auth token, and it will be displayed here in the browser, and you can keep track of it. CRM variables, this is a way to store static data if you need to pull it into certain templates over again or use it in custom functions. It's a great way to keep things efficient and organized. And then web forms are used to bring records into the system, into various modules. So you can create a web form and embed it on your site, customize the CSS so that it fits in nicely, and bring those records directly into the CRM. Going back to the APIs, on the account management side, we've gone through most of the settings within the CRM here. The next thing that I wanted to go over is on the account side. You can see all of your active auth tokens. Be very careful with who you share these auth tokens with. Of course, this is just our demo account, so it doesn't matter. But anyone that has access to these auth tokens has access to your system. So giving a detailed description of what that auth token is used for can definitely help you keep track of which ones you're actually using and which ones you can kill. So you can see here that here's an auth token that hasn't been used in almost a year. Go ahead and delete that if it's not being used, so that you don't have lingering vulnerabilities to your system. You can also see the different IP addresses that have accessed your system to see if there's a rogue login out there. We can also see connected apps and which devices have logged in. We can also see the current active session and kill active sessions if you need to. Going back here to, that was basically the active sessions, your activity history. Setting up two-factor authentication, I highly recommend this if you have sensitive data in your system, so that new logins will have to verify via text message. You can also restrict access to the system by IP address, so that users outside of the office cannot access this. Of course, keep in mind that they won't be able to access the data through the mobile app then either. If you have a rep that leaves the organization, make sure that you come in and deactivate their mobile access or under their active session, so that they don't have lingering access to the system through the mobile app. Here's where you can change your current password and update your security question. There are a couple of different places that you can create groups within the CRM and then within the accounts module as well. This is a good way to share documents and data sharing settings with the organization. Under preferences, these are just general organization settings in terms of date format, which websites can have your information, your linked accounts, and some API authentication. And finally, your personal information. If you end up changing your email address, this is where you'll go to update your email. So you can add a new email in here and then change it to the primary and delete the old one if you need to. And the various phone numbers for your organization. And that's a pretty thorough run through of the CRM settings. Again, there'll be some follow-up videos with some detail into some of the areas that we touched on. We certainly look forward to helping out if you have any needs in the future. So please feel free to reach out. Thanks a lot.